I just want to say that overall these cameras are fantastic, and I've had like an A- experience using them over like the past 7 years. So there's not a lot to complain about, but there are just a few things here and there that really piss me off and get on my nerves. So I figured I'd point them out to you guys here in this video. And if you guys are trying to get into Sony, then this might be the video for you guys to watch. A few key things here and there to like be aware of. And if anybody from Sony is watching or listening, please fix these things, please. Thank you very much. And overall, the things that bother me the most can be broken down into like two main categories, and there are a few miscellaneous items here and there that we'll go over at the end of the video. The first of which being is that there are just too many damn models, and the names just don't make sense at all. Honestly, this is not really just a Sony camera thing. This is also like a Sony overall thing, like their headphones, their hard drives, their phones, all the names are all over the place. But camera specifically, like this is part of the FX line. So everything FX is like their mirrorless cinema cameras. Great, that makes sense. And they have a bunch of different models like the 3, the 6, the 9. That makes total sense. Then they have their A7S line, A7R, A7, all of that stuff. That makes sense. But then all of a sudden, they went for the A6000 line. It's hard to keep track of which camera came out when and which camera is the predecessor for which. They had this whole system going with the A7 line where, you know, you would have Mark 1s, Mark 2s, Mark 3s, Mark 4s, etc. And then all of a sudden you go into the APS-C line and it's just A6000, A6100, 6300, 64. That just makes no sense. Like the A6700 that came out recently is a successor to the A6600, which is fine, but like, so the A6500 to the 700 is like one category of cameras that has IBIS in it, and then the 63 and the 64 are a different category, and then the 61, 60, like, this is just too confusing. And why couldn't they just stick with the whole A7 or the A9 system? Why do they have to go with the A6000 system? Now, are we going to get an A6600 Mark II? Why? And what happens when you run out of the numbers? Now, this is just so confusing with like which range of numbers is for which purpose, and like just too many things for like a newbie to keep track of. On top of all of that, there's a whole ZV line of cameras like the ZV-1 or the ZV-E1 or the ZV-E10. And even though the ZV-E10 is an APS-C camera, like the entire A6000 line of cameras, that still gets a Mark II, even though the 6000 series don't. Like the ZV-E10 Mark II. Why wasn't it called the ZV-E20? So you see how all of this can be incredibly confusing. I mean, it's good that we have so many choices to pick from, but all of these cameras, the names are just so convoluted, and they're all differentiated by like one or two features, like the A6700 and the FX30. One's part of the cinema line, and one's part of like the budget APS-C line. They are incredibly similar cameras. So for someone who's just kind of getting into this ecosystem, it can be really hard to kind of get up to speed with all of these cameras. So I really wish that Sony would simplify some of this stuff and get rid of some of the models that they don't need, because I feel like there's just an incredible amount of overlap. I recently had to help my sister out with a new camera that she wanted to get, and it was her first time getting like a legitimate interchangeable lens camera, and I basically had to put myself in her shoes, and I was lost, and I can't even imagine how bad it was for her. So I wish Sony would simplify some of this stuff. It's just too damn confusing to follow. Next up would be software updates. And honestly, if you're thinking of picking up your first Sony camera, this is the number one thing that you need to be aware of, that their software updates suck, like really bad. Like right now, my FX3 is on software version 6.0. And I feel like all the features they've added, they should have been 1, maybe 2 updates total. Like they'll add a minor thing here or there and they'll call it a whole new version number. And even the wait for those minor things is so long. It's absurd. It's absolutely stupid. And honestly, right now I'm waiting for version 7.0, which they announced recently. And here, I'm going to read it out to you guys right from their website. On Sony's official website, it says that the FX3 and the FX30 are going to get software version 7.0 and 6.0 respectively, and these are the 3 things that they're going to add. The Big 6 menu system from the Venice and the Burano. Okay. The ability to output RAW over HDMI for Blackmagic RAW. Okay. And the ability to de-squeeze 1.5 times. I kid you not, those are the 3 things, and that's it. And guess what? Right now it's January 2025, and we can expect this in September. 9 months for 3 features. And they're not even that good. Like, the menus are fine. Why do we need the big 6 system? Like, what about false color monitoring, or like vector scopes, or all the other D-squeeze options like 1.6 or 1.8? What about 48 frames a second? What about open gate recording? Or what about like clear image 2.0, where you don't lose the eye tracking when you use it? What about all these meaningful changes that you guys could have made in a 7.0 version, but just 1.5 D-squeeze? That's it? And a slightly different menu? Like, that's just stupid. The menu systems are quite good now, so I don't really have any real complaints there. But the software updates, the pace they come out at, is honestly just laughable. So yeah, you just need to be aware of that. So next up is something super simple, and it's just better screens for their cameras. And Sony just keeps putting like 2 million dot, 3 million dot screens on their cameras, and I just think in 2025 now, it's just not cutting it. And I'm really hoping they can like step up their game and actually put some legit high quality screens on their cameras. That would be very, very welcome. Ergonomics is also a big one. I've said before that I always keep this small rig cage on my FX3, and I also have a half cage on my A7 IVs, and that's just because I prefer the grip with the cage on the camera. And if the cameras were just a little bit more ergonomic, I wouldn't have to do that, because something like this, the FX3, it's designed to be a cageless camera, but I still have a cage on it because I just feel like the camera's too small and the grip on its own just isn't too comfortable. So something just even this much bigger would just be so much better to hold. I know they're making improvements with the new A1 Mark II and the A9 Mark III, but I just wish that stuff would trickle really quickly over to like the other camera lines. It would just be so much better if these were more ergonomic. Next up is Sony not playing nice with third-party batteries. And here I have my FX3 with a third-party battery, and I'll show you guys the back of the screen. Do you guys see the battery icon in the top right there? Do you guys see any problem with that? Yeah, so in one of the recent FX3 updates, Sony decided to get rid of the bars that you would typically see in a battery icon, and instead they just show the exact percentage. So it's a lot more accurate, and you know exactly what percent you have left for your batteries. Totally fine, but that only works for Sony original batteries. So if I have a third-party battery in, it's totally blank. And I have absolutely no idea if it's a full battery or a dead one. So I'll find out when I'm running low on battery when my camera shuts off. Like, that's just really absurd and stupid. I personally think this just comes across as really petty on Sony's part. Like, I understand they want us to buy their batteries, but like, don't cripple our cameras like that. Like, that's just absurd. Like, this is a huge usability problem. Like, I want to be able to use my camera normally, even if I didn't spend $120 Canadian on original Sony batteries. The thing is, I actually have 9 original Sony batteries, so I've spent close to 1,000 Canadian dollars on original Sony batteries. It's just 9 batteries don't cut it for my workflow, so I need closer to like 18 or 20 batteries. And so I decided to pick up like third-party batteries to fill in the gaps, and Sony is just deciding to cripple our cameras like that because we've decided to save a few bucks here and there. Like, I still spent close to $5,000 on your camera. The least you could do is show me the percentage of my battery. Like, it's just stupid. It's just really, really stupid. Alright, I think that's enough for one video, and I really hope that Sony is working on addressing these issues, because as a real customer, it would mean a lot to me as someone who invests heavily in their equipment, that they're actively making an effort to make it a better experience for me to use their product. If you guys liked this video or found it helpful, don't forget to leave it a like, and if you guys want to check out the rant I made on ND filters, you guys can click right over here, and I'll see you guys there.